I want to do a brief talk on the logical fallacies used, a lot of them that are every day used by the left to manipulate not only the left, but the other people that they're arguing with or whatever. So the first one I want to present is a straw man. A straw man argument is when you accuse somebody of something, whether it's true or not. You accuse them of it, then you argue your accusation, like what you accuse them of, you argue and then assert that you are correct because you've won that argument. So it's like if I'm arguing with somebody and I'm arguing that, drinking coffee is good to keep you awake. And I say, well, you're a Nazi, and you would have supported Nazis. And because of that, you don't have good judgment. So you wouldn't know what good coffee was. You're making a ridiculous argument. You're accusing somebody of something that they probably aren't anywhere near being guilty of, and then arguing your own accusation to come to your own conclusion, and then standing over them like you really taught them something, like you really straightened them out. That's what the left uses against us all the time. You're racist. You own slaves. You owe us reparations. So a person that is like that is a demon. You don't have a moral compass. So we win the argument. I just accuse everybody of being racist and then argue that person's supposed racism as though that makes them correct or right. It's a logical fallacy. A logical fallacy you have to use when you don't have a good argument to manipulate the other person because you can't actually win the argument because you're not smart enough and you're not right. Okay? Whenever you have to use a logical fallacy, it's because you're not right. You're incorrect and you have to manipulate people in order to win. Another one is false equivalence. People like to use false equivalence. They call it apples and oranges. Like, give you an example of the Don Lemon guy or whatever. He was arguing Terry Crews. And Terry Crews was basically saying if the movement is called Black Lives Matter, it should care about all black lives, and that it should care about how most black lives are ending, and how most black lives are ending is at the hands of black people. And so he's saying, if your movement's called Black Lives Matter, you should care about black lives. And Don Lemon was like, no, the movement is about police brutality. So that's kind of like creating a movement called Cancer Matters and then someone getting mad at you because you don't talk about AIDS. And it got Terry Crews to go, because it was manipulated. He just manipulated him. What would have been a true equivalent, see, he argued that Terry was wrong because he was using false equivalents or apples and oranges. But his justification when he argued that, he used a false equivalent to manipulate Terry. He said that the cancer and AIDS analogy. But no, Black Lives Matter, its name is Black Lives Matter, but it only cares about a very small subset of black lives. A very small subset, those killed at the hands of white people. Or if you read their belief statement, sodomites and transgenders and whatnot, and dismantling patriarchy and all that stuff, and breaking down the family and all that stuff. So that's what that movement is about, but they call it Black Lives Matter, and so it's right for Terry to expect them to care about black lives, all black lives, because their name is called Black Lives. What would have been a true analogy for Don Lemon to use would be to say, to create a movement called Cancer Matters, but in the fine print, in the small print, it really just be about pancreatic cancer. And then whenever people come up and they're like, well, most people are dying from breast cancer, or very few people die from pancreatic cancer. We should care about the cancer that's killing the most people. And people then say, no, this movement is called Cancer Matters, but it's really just about pancreatic cancer. You can't expect us to care about other cancers. Well, other cancers are going to expect them to care about them because the movement is called Cancer Matters. Okay? Not pancreatic cancer matters. Now, if the movement was called Pancreatic Cancer Matters, then nobody would have anything to say, except if, like, you had pancreatic cancer and they didn't represent you. And that's the same. Is there are 99.9% of black lives end in other ways than police brutality. Police brutality ends very few innocent black lives. Now, let me make this clear. Just because the police kills a black person or a white person or a Hispanic person does not mean that it's the police that ended that person's life. For instance, if I go out, I say I am going to go out and I am going to start a mass shooting. Say I chose I was going to do a mass shooting. And I go around and I get my gun and somebody shoots me before I have a chance to do this mass shooting. Okay? I killed myself in that situation because I chose to do that. If you go out there and you choose to commit armed robbery and rob a bank, and on your way out, you're using guns and shooting at people and stuff, and a cop kills you, the cop may have ended your life, but it was you that killed yourself. Because if you hadn't chose to go out there and rob the bank, to use weapons and assault people, you would never have been shot by them cops. The situation would have never occurred. The personal accountability is your own. So when I say a cop killing a black person, I mean like the cop just murdering the black person when he shouldn't have, sort of like George Floyd, okay? George Floyd may have been a career criminal, but at that point in time, all he had done was maybe use some counterfeit money, and he did not need a cop to sit on his neck for 9 minutes until he died, okay? That's just a fact. But that is one life ended by a cop. Now, in most situations, and you could even argue that had he never used that counterfeit bill, then the cops never would have been there. So you could argue that he did kill himself. But in that situation, the punishment did not fit the crime. So you could say, yeah, the cop definitely murdered George Floyd. But in most situations with cops, the punishment fits the crime. So the person is trying to kill or hurt another person, and the cop kills them first. That's that person chose to kill themselves. I look at it this way. If somebody broke into my house and I shot them dead, I wouldn't feel a thing. I didn't kill them. I didn't want them to break into my house while I'm asleep or whatever. I didn't ask for them to do that. I didn't want any part of it. I'd never want to have to use my guns to kill somebody. I mean, I have nightmares that I might have to one day. I don't want to, okay? But if you break into my house at night and you're trying to victimize my family and I kill you, I ain't going to feel bad about it at all. I ain't going to lose an ounce of sleep. Why would I care? You chose to kill yourself. You committed suicide. I was just your weapon, because you're the one that chose to come into my house at night and try to victimize me and my family. I didn't choose for you to do that. And had you not chosen to do that, you'd still be alive. And that's the situation. People need to take personal accountability. If you do something like that, then you need to take responsibility for yourself. You've killed yourself. Look at it this way. Another way. People that go on that show, Deadliest Catch, they sign a statement that if they die, they can't sue the ship. You're making a statement. You're understanding, hey, this is a dangerous job. I can't just sue everybody if something bad happens. This is a dangerous job. That's a risk that I accept. So you've accepted the risk. That means you're taking your life into your own hands. Now, if the ship sinks or something and you lose your life, then it's not the ship's fault or the ship's captain's fault. It's your fault. You chose to do that job. It's the same way with any criminal or anything else. You're choosing to do that job. You're choosing to live a life of crime. And if your life is ended because of your choice, then you need to accept responsibility for it. So those are just the two main ones that I see: false equivalence and straw man arguments that are used by the left. And there's probably a lot more. There's at least 100 logical fallacies out there. And whenever somebody has to use a logical fallacy, it means they have a bad argument. It means they know they can't win. It means they're not very smart. And, you just need to know how to spot it so you can call them on it. Because if I'm, having a talk with somebody and they use a logical fallacy, then I know that there's no point in trying to talk to that person, because all they're interested in is trying to manipulate me while I'm trying to help them see facts. They just want to manipulate me to see their lies, which tells me that they know their lies, but they just stick to them anyway for some reason. And that's what most of the left is doing. They know what they're doing is lies. They know coronavirus is a sham, and they know all this stuff, but they're just pushing it because they want to take Trump out of office. They think the ends justify the means, so they're just pushing all this stuff. They know these protests are wrong, where they're burning down buildings and these types of things. These supposed protests are really just riots, but they know they're wrong, and they're just, doing it anyway. And this is where you need to understand the type of person that you're arguing with. Somebody that wants to be wrong, that is out there trying to manipulate you for a reason, that it's, they know they're wrong, but they're still defending their position because they have some agenda or something like that. You can't win an argument with that person. You can't win a debate with that person. You can't reason with that person. And you can tell what kind of person that is when they start using logical fallacies like false equivalence or straw man arguments. They accuse you of something. Oftentimes, it's exactly what they are. For instance, I'll make this last example. But one of my first videos, I talked about how I feel God feels about what the Black Lives Matter movement is doing. The rioting and stuff that is going on, burning down people's livings, killing people, stuff like that. And I talked about that. Now, I did not say these skin color are out here raiding, looting, whatever. I just talked about the actions that were being done and the character of the person, because that's how I was taught, to judge people by the content of their character. And so I was judging the content of character. Well, somebody else took the character actions of what I was judging and then attached a race to it, as though only that race would do those actions, and then called me racist, and then used that as a position to pretend as though they were somehow elevated over me, but they were the ones being racist. It's often hypocritical, whatever they judge you of. People will call you juvenile or little kid or not smart or all these things, when it's actually them that is being those things, and they're just straw manning you. They're just calling you something else so that they can assert some sort of authority over you. Oh, I'll give you one last logical equivalence or logical fallacy that is used all the time. I mean, all the time by the left. An appeal to authority. They like to say, well, the experts say. Now, they can never back up that statement, or they'll never be able to argue if you show them a counter expert that actually shows valid and real science. They won't be able to argue that. They'll just tell you what the experts say. And an appeal to authority is a logical fallacy. Pretending to be an expert, or to say you're an expert, or to give yourself some authority that you don't have. So how a lot of people do this is I'll talk to somebody, say about the Bible. I've read the Bible dozens of times. I know what it says. I've listened to it hundreds of times. I know what it says. I still don't consider myself an expert or call myself an expert. I just know what it says. And so I'll be talking to somebody about something that the Bible says, like the basic foundation of the Bible is that, the gospel is that Jesus came down to save us because we couldn't save ourselves, and all we have to do is trust in that death, burial, and resurrection to get us to heaven. And I'll be talking to somebody, and they'll tell me something that is totally unbiblical. And I know why they believe it, because they don't have spiritual discernment. They don't understand the gospel. And so they're double-minded. So they're saying two opposite things all the time, and they just don't recognize it or see it. And I know why they believe what they believe, but I also know that they're wrong because I know the Bible. And then they'll use this appeal to authority to say, oh, well, I read, Schofield and his book, and I read this book, and this man's an expert in the Bible, blah, 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 blah. Well, Schofield's in hell right now. He died and went to hell. The Bible tells us he died and went to hell because he changed the words of the Bible. And that's what the Bible tells us happens if you change the words of the Bible. He was a total false prophet. Everything that he did. I mean, even Paul said that a man that does not take care of his own is worse than an infidel, and that was Schofield. Schofield abandoned his wife and children to just go live a whole nother life, married a whole nother woman, and made himself a preacher, was just as wicked as could be. But people will say, oh, they'll appeal to him as an expert. Well, he doesn't even know the gospel. He never knew the gospel, never believed the gospel. So, excuse me, he's in hell. So he's not an authority. But they appeal to him as authority because they don't know any better. Or they'll tell me something like, well, I've read the Bible and, I know what it says. But because I know that they're wrong, I know that their appeal to authority is a logical fallacy because they're appealing to an authority while asserting a lie. Sort of like if I said, I've studied rocket science my whole life. I'm telling you for a fact the earth is flat. Yeah, sure. I can tell you, I appeal to authority. I can tell you I'm a rocket science. I can tell you I've been to space and all this other stuff. Don't matter if I'm lying or whatever. I'm just appealing to authority so that I can debunk your point. Yeah, well, that's how I know that the earth is flat. So you can go around and tell me the earth is round all you want, but I went up in space and I looked, and it only looked round because I had a fisheye lens or whatever these people say. They're just appealing to some authority that they don't have. And, so those are at least three that are always used by the left. They appeal to authority, what the experts say, blah, 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 blah. Look at these coronavirus experts. They done said 2,000 different things in a record amount of time. It's been like 3 or 4 months and they've changed their story 2,000 times. Like, why does anybody believe anything they say anymore? You have to be an idiot. The straw man arguments. They're quick to call everyone a racist and then argue that racism and then act like they take the high road. They just literally call you a name that insults your character and then argue the name that they called you and then take the high road and act like they're king bee. And then the other one, the false equivalents, the apples and oranges, as some people like to call it. They love to do that as well, where they compare. They make some comparison to manipulate you, but the comparison really doesn't reflect anything. So either way, those are three things that you can look at all the time when you're talking to a person from the left. And if they use them types of arguments, then you know that you can't win that argument because the person is either dumb. Hey, go. The person is either dumb, or they just don't have any understanding, or they know they're wrong and they are just still arguing that point because they want you to be on the wrong side with them to help them serve whatever the agenda is. And as it seems now, the agenda is to take President Trump out, anything to make that happen. So that's just a simple way to look. I understand that, I overtalk some of these points, but they're just important to drive in, drive home, and get people to understand that this is stuff that's going on. This is how they manipulate you. This is how they control you. This is how they get you to see their way, okay? And I see it. I can't say that I don't see it on the right. I see it on the right too. I see a lot of this, double talk and stuff like that. All that stuff needs to stop. You need to be able to just, if you need to not manipulate people to get on. If you have to manipulate people to get on your side, you're wrong, okay? And if you either need to find a stronger argument for your point so that you can be right, or abandon that point, whatever it is. Okay? If you need to try to manipulate people to get on your side, you're wrong. Okay? And either your point is right and you're wrong in the way that you're going about it, or your point is wrong entirely. Okay? So we need to understand that. You should be able to just logically talk to somebody and get them to understand a reasonable person. Now, if they're not a reasonable person, if they're presenting you with all kinds of logical fallacies and stuff like that, you need to quit wasting your time, because it's a waste of your time. All right? God bless y'all.